Previously, as Suho stepped toward the dungeon gate, his resolve unshaken. As the magical veil engulfed him, his thoughts turned to his father, the man who once carried the world alone. But Suho wasn't alone. With a single command, Essel and Gray appeared beside him, ready for battle. Before them stretched a horde of grotesque monsters. Suho tightened his gauntlets, eyes filled with determination. No fear, no hesitation, only focus. With unwavering confidence, he gave the signal. Let's level up. The scene opens with a car stopping before a dark, looming building. From within, Lee Min-sung steps out. His face is hidden behind a sleek, minimalist mask, an intentional disguise meant to keep his identity from being recognized. Without glancing back, he gives his driver a calm instruction to stay close, assuring him that he won't be long. As Lee approaches the foreboding building, his mind turns inward. It has been 3 months, he reflects bitterly. 3 months since his last encounter with the Apostle of Aterim. Every passing day since that meeting has felt like a slow-burning resentment he can't extinguish. A lone guard stands near the entrance, quietly tending to a potted plant. Keeping his head low, Lee walks carefully, hoping to move past without drawing attention. But the guard's gaze sharpens. Recognition flickers in his eyes. Breaking the silence, the guard comments that he recognizes him from the news. The vice executive of the Grim Reaper Guild, Lee Min-sung himself. A hint of irritation flashes beneath Lee's mask. He's been noticed. So much for remaining anonymous. Yet he adapts instantly. Removing the mask, he offers a charming, practiced smile. He responds smoothly, praising the guard's keen observation in a tone calm and controlled, maintaining the persona he has so carefully built. The guard straightens proudly, his face bright with admiration. He wishes Lee good luck and calls him a hero among hunters. Lee simply nods and continues deeper into the building. As the corridor stretches before him, old memories surface, echoes of a life that once seemed unshakable. He recalls his youth, born into privilege as the son of the vice chairman of Eugene Construction. From the very beginning, the world had treated him as someone destined for greatness. His life had been a constant parade of success, wealth, power, influence, and the adoration of millions. People once called him the Prince of Asia, a man to whom victory came as naturally as breathing. But that perfect image shattered when the great cataclysm struck. Overnight, the rules of power changed. Gates appeared, monsters roamed, and awakened hunters became the new rulers of society. The privileges Lee once relied on suddenly meant nothing. His thoughts drift to a single moment he'll never forget, a conversation with his driver, Lim Tae-woo, a man he had always seen as ordinary, quiet, and dutiful. He remembers asking in disbelief if Lim had truly awakened. Lim had confirmed it with a broad grin, revealing that he had awakened as an S-rank hunter, one of the strongest individuals alive. He had even added casually that people were encouraging him to start his own guild. Those words struck Lee harder than any physical blow. His pride trembled under the weight of realization. The man who once opened his car door was now stronger, more respected, and far more powerful than he could ever be through status alone. Lee had been left stunned, his mind reeling at how quickly the world had changed. The old social order had collapsed right before his eyes. From that day onward, his perspective shifted. Fame, luxury, and recognition suddenly felt hollow, empty symbols in a world ruled by power. The hierarchy had reversed. Those once powerless now stood at the top, while the privileged struggled to keep up. In the present, Lee Min-sung leaned against the elevator wall as it rose, his thoughts still tangled in the same haunting memories that had shadowed him for months. He silently vowed to himself that he would restore the world to how it had been, his jaw tightening with grim determination. He even admitted inwardly that he would bargain with demons if that was what it took to bring order back to the broken structure of society. When the elevator doors opened with a soft chime, they revealed a dark room whose silence felt almost suffocating. Several men stood before him, their faces stretched into grotesque smiles that made Lee's stomach turn. Their eyes held a malevolent gleam that amplified his revulsion. He curled his lip in contempt and warned them to wipe those revolting grins from their faces before he would tear their mouths open, then strode past without slowing. His gaze swept the room with cold precision as he demanded to know where their boss was, reminding them that it had been some time since their last meeting and questioning whether they would even offer a welcome. The men remained unnervingly silent, their grins fixed in place, and the heavy stillness stretched until a chilling voice finally pierced the darkness and spoke his name. Lee's eyes widened in surprise, and he froze briefly. When he turned, his gaze landed on a childlike figure standing in the shadows, its hair and eyes glowing an eerie yellow that sent a shiver down his spine. He recognized the figure as the Apostle of Iterum and, almost in a whisper, acknowledged the being as an outer worlder. And Lee kept his unease hidden behind a practiced nonchalance as he approached. Playfully, Lee tapped the childlike figure on the head and remarked that the last time they had met the Apostle had seemed like a child. But now the Apostle looked fully grown and far stronger, adding that the being's mana had clearly increased. A sly grin creased Lee's face as he suggested that everything appeared to be going according to plan. The Apostle remained expressionless and corrected him, explaining that he was not growing but recovering. When beings with vast mana crossed dimensions, their bodies fragmented to survive the journey, and the first fragment that arrived was always the weakest. Now the Apostle said he had fused with the second fragment, an explanation delivered with the same placid detachment as he turned pages in the book he carried, as if the conversation itself were trivial. Lee settled into a worn sofa nearby and tried to appear casual, though the Apostle's faint, distant tone made the air feel heavier, as if the room itself carried the weight of another realm. The Apostle noted that while his memories remained intact, his personality had altered. He warned Lee not to expect the familiarity of the past and said plainly that their old relationship was an illusion they should dispense with. Lee raised an eyebrow and offered a crooked, light-hearted remark about complexity, but his sharp eyes betrayed a harder intent. He made it clear that he did not care who the Apostle had become as long as the terms of their deal remained honored. The Apostle, still half engrossed in his book, began to answer with a disinterested recitation that included mentions of wealth and fame before Lee cut him off. Lee interjected venomously, reminding the Apostle that part of their agreement involved the removal of Lim Tigu, the S-rank hunter, and the mention of that name darkened his expression with unmistakable malice. He leaned back and spoke with a lazy posture, though his voice carried an unsettling calm, insisting that as long as the Apostle had not forgotten that clause of their bargain, they were still on the same page. The Apostle finally lowered his gaze from the book and demanded to know why Lee had come, stating that Lee should only appear for matters that were truly urgent, and that this meeting had better be worth his time. Lee straightened into a more formal stance and reported that a serious problem had arisen in the Stardust production line. Both the Hyena Guild, responsible for supplying firewood, and the Seoul factory had been wiped out. He explained that he had come to discuss reinforcements and additional resources necessary to keep production going, letting the gravity of the situation settle in the dim room. The Apostle's yellow eyes briefly flickered with interest, and he asked sharply whether the attack on both facilities had an identified perpetrator. Lee exhaled slowly and admitted that a masked individual had taken down the Hyena Guild, his voice faltering as the Apostle's gaze intensified. Angrily, the Apostle accused Lee of designing the system and guaranteeing its stability, accusing him of now requesting that the Apostle clean up the very mess Lee's incompetence had produced. The Apostle's words landed like daggers. Lee's jaw tightened and his fingers twitched in irritation as he argued that progress required risks, and that if they had addressed every minor flaw before starting, they would still be at square one. The Apostle sneered and repeated that Lee was incompetent, stating that his earlier self had erred in choosing Lee as a pawn, a miscalculation now painfully obvious. The insult snapped something in Lee. A dangerous light appeared in his eyes, and his hand slid instinctively toward the hidden blade beneath his pants. In one fluid motion, Lee moved behind the Apostle and pressed the cold edge of the knife against the being's throat, hissing that Lee was not a brainwashed lackey and warning that, as an A-rank hunter, he could end the Apostle before the Apostle fully recovered. The Apostle remained unshaken. His glowing yellow eyes held steady as he dismissed Lee's threat and observed, without warmth, that Lee's actions only proved he was a pawn, easily manipulated by emotion and still clinging to primitive metrics like mana levels, as if they were the ultimate measure of power. Without warning, the apostle released a sudden surge of energy. The air thickened and the influence rippled outward as an oppressive pressure pressed down over the building. The apostle's control spread. Down in the lobby, the guard who had earlier recognized Lee froze and then showed the same sickly yellow glow in his eyes. Realization struck Lee like lightning. He understood that the apostle had taken control of everyone in the building. It was not mere display, but domination, as if the structure itself had become an extension of the apostle's will. The walls vibrated with an ominous hum, the collective force of the apostle's hold manifesting as a palpable, menacing presence that gnawed at Lee's confidence. The childlike figure was now an unfathomable threat. The apostle explained that he had tolerated Lee's earlier incompetence for survival, but now that his strength was returning, their arrangement could change, and whether Lee remained useful depended on whether he could prove himself more than a liability. At that signal, the brainwashed humans moved in perfect, synchronized steps, their faces blank except for a yellow-tinged gleam of controlled bloodlust. Weapons materialized in their hands and the mob tightened its formation like a coiled spring. Lee felt his heart pound as the horde closed in, their blades catching the dim light. The atmosphere became suffocating, and the odds of fighting his way out immediately seemed insurmountable. Calculating quickly, Lee tossed his knife onto the floor and raised his hands in a mock surrender, forcing a strained, cheerful tone as he tried to pass off the situation as a joke and to coax the mob into lowering their aggression. He claimed, lightly but with evident strain, that he had only been testing whether they were truly capable of killing an S-rank hunter, and asserted that there was no reason for them to become too serious over it. The apostle studied him coldly, then snapped the book shut and declared that Lee was fortunate. For now he would be spared because he still had some utility. With a simple flick of the apostle's hand, the oppressive energy dissipated, and the mind-controlled crowd slowly returned to normal, seemingly oblivious to the bloodlust that had consumed them minutes before. Almost immediately, one of the apostle's subordinates entered, carrying a heavy suitcase, and placed it before Lee. When she opened it, the case revealed rows of shimmering vials that pulsed with a faint, captivating glow. The apostle explained that the vials contained stimulants refined from Stardust, condensed 100-fold. When diluted, they would provide enough fuel to sustain Lee's entire operation. Lee studied the vials with narrowed eyes in suspicion, mentally noting the potency the apostle claimed, far stronger than the low-grade Stardust he had been supplying weaker hunters. The apostle suggested that Lee test the stimulants himself to see their effect, boasting that the formula could even elevate an A-rank hunter's capabilities. Lee hesitated, picked up a vial briefly, then chuckled nervously and set it back, saying that he preferred not to use something he did not fully understand. As he turned toward the exit, he reminded the apostle to remember their deal and that he expected the apostle to keep his end of the bargain. Walking away, Lee's mind churned with a dark thought. He may have just unleashed an unimaginable monster onto the world, but he told himself grimly that it was no longer his problem, at least not directly. And his footsteps echoed down the corridor as the weight of the choice pressed on him. Back in the room, the apostle closed the book he had been reading and turned his gaze to the window. His hand rose slowly as he murmured that something was coming. Another fragment was near. A sinister smile spread across the apostle's lips as his aura darkened and his presence grew more oppressive. He mused that once he fully merged with the fragment, the need for a facade would end. That was when the real invasion would begin. The scene then shifted to a cavernous dungeon where Suho and his party were fighting for their lives. Towering before them was a massive serpent, its scaled body shimmering ominously in the dungeon's weak light. Without hesitation, Suho leaped into the air and latched onto the serpent's massive frame, his body a blur as he clung to its scales with unyielding grip, while the beast thrashed in a desperate attempt to throw him off. Essel had cried out for him to get down, panic in her voice as the serpent slammed against the dungeon walls and the chamber reverberated with each crushing impact. But Suho refused to relent. Gritting his teeth, he wrapped his arms around the serpent's thick neck and began to squeeze with every ounce of strength he had. The serpent writhed and roared, those roars turning into agonized screams as blood seeped from its mouth and nostrils and its movements weakened. With a final thunderous crash, the creature collapsed, and its massive body slammed onto the floor. The ground shuddered beneath the impact, and dust rose in choking clouds. Suho landed gracefully beside the carcass, chest heaving as he wiped blood from his hands. The focus moved to a young woman waiting by a shimmering gate. Her face was taut with unease and her lips pressed into a thin line as she glanced nervously at the others. She voiced her skepticism aloud, questioning whether the job they'd been hired for was too risky. They were being paid 5 million won each simply to sit and wait for that hunter to exit, then keep silent about whatever they saw. She fidgeted with her cap and asked why Lee would offer that much money for such a simple task, clearly struggling to understand the arrangement. Sitting nearby on a weathered bench, a man with a crippled leg observed her with weary eyes and answered calmly that this was the 4th time the group had been hired for such work, and they had always been paid without exception. For hunters, clearing gates was routine, almost like community service. Though his tone was detached, a flicker of curiosity crossed his face. The girl nodded hesitantly, but admitted her unease remained. Still, as long as they kept getting paid, she supposed it was none of their business. The man's gaze narrowed as he looked toward the gate and thought that something didn't add up. Why would Suho come to a gate like this without an excavation crew or collection team? The whole setup felt wrong. He remembered Suho earlier exploits, clearing D-rank gates, then moving through C-rank ones with ease, and wondered why Suho seemed to be rushing into these dungeons and what exactly he sought inside. Inside the gate, the cavern hummed with a different kind of tension. The sharp clang of tools against crystal-coated walls echoed as Suho's shadow goblins worked the seam. The dungeon floor glittered with fragments of mined treasure, while the goblins gathered and transported the spoils with unblinking focus. Baru's booming voice demanded they work faster and put more effort into it, scolding them as if the expedition were no leisurely stroll. Nearby, Essel and Gray were salvaging valuable materials from fallen monsters. Gray knelt beside a grotesque spider carcass and tore at its tough leg joints with grim concentration. Essel paused and joked that looting wasn't as easy as people imagined, though her humor carried an undercurrent of tension as she glanced toward the massive door leading to the boss room. Her expression darkened, and she murmured that Suho was inside the boss room alone, wondering aloud whether they should really be this calm. Beyond the heavy door, the boss chamber thrummed with tension as Suho dodged the monstrous spider's strikes with fluid precision. The spider's enormous legs slammed down with earth-shaking force, cracking stone with each near miss, but Suho's agility kept him safely out of harm's way. He launched himself into the air and activated his Storm Slash, a cascade of swift slashes that tore into the spider's thick exoskeleton and sprayed dark ichor across the chamber walls. A system notification flickered before his eyes, indicating a paralyze effect had activated but had been weakened due to high resistance, and Suho muttered that the spider had resisted the paralysis. He noted mentally that he had hoped the weapon's venom would work better against spiders, but the spider boss's natural resistance posed a major obstacle. Adjusting on the fly, Suho hurled the dagger with pinpoint accuracy. It embedded itself deep into the spider's grotesque eye, with a sickening crunch that elicited an ear-piercing screech from the beast. Seizing the opening, Suho lunged forward and delivered a devastating punch to the spider's head, the blow producing a visible shockwave that staggered the creature as ichor spilled from its wounds. Landing nimbly, he mused that if venom wouldn't work, brute force would, but Suho pressed the attack, summoning his dagger back through his command of shadow authority. Armed again, he unleashed a barrage of precise slashes and felt a surge of confidence. Taking down C-rank bosses was beginning to feel almost trivial. A new ambition flickered in his mind. Perhaps B-rank dungeons would finally offer the challenge he sought. An idea struck him: to combine the invisible force of ruler's authority with the physical impact of his strikes. Until now, he had used the skill to manipulate objects. But what if it could amplify his blows? Pivoting midair, Suho gathered the invisible energy of ruler's authority into his fist and channeled it into a devastating punch aimed at the spider's skull. The moment his fist connected, the impact was cataclysmic. A deafening boom rolled through the chamber, and the spider's skull caved under the sheer force. With renewed determination, he continued a relentless onslaught, each strike imbued with the authority's invisible force, until the spider's battered body finally crumpled into a lifeless heap. System notifications flooded his vision, announcing a level up. Ruler's authority had advanced to level 2. Breathing heavily, he leaned against the spider's corpse and checked his stamina, which was dangerously low at 83%, the fight having drained him considerably. He reflected that using Ruler's authority mid-fight burned his reserves fast, but each battle left him improving bit by bit. At the entrance of the dungeon, Essel and Gray waited tensely, their eyes fixed on the looming gate. When Suho finally emerged victorious, both of them exhaled at once as the tight knot of anxiety drained away. Essel waved and called out excitedly to him, but Suho barely registered her words. His mind was already racing with plans to sharpen his new powers. As he drew near, Essel greeted him with an admiring smile and asked in wonder whether he had really defeated the boss on his own. Suho offered a small nod and a faint smile, but before he could elaborate, Baru's deep, commanding voice rang out from nearby. The Shadow Knight praised the young monarch, astonished that Suho had toppled the boss without assistance. The pride in Baru's tone was obvious. Suho let out a soft chuckle and shook his head. He told Baru to conserve his strength for now and pointed toward the scattered remains of the defeated monsters. The pile of bodies held magic essence crystals and other valuable resources that would help Baru recover. He commended them for their efforts, voice steady and grateful. Then he summoned his system interface. The familiar glowing menu blinked into existence, and he began selling the materials they had collected. As he flicked through the shop options, he admired how convenient the system was. Selling everything on the spot saved time and risk, and the converted currency would let him buy gear and supplies he actually needed. While Suho tended to inventory and planning, Baru stepped closer with a tone of admiration. He noted that Suho's growth was remarkable. The young monarch was approaching the strength of low-rank hunters, perhaps even A or B rank. Suho glanced at his own status screen and admitted that he could feel the change. He had leveled up 8 times and was now level 28. His excitement, however, faded a little as he noticed 2 odd things. His class remained unassigned, and all the stat points he had gained were already allocated. Baru turned his attention to Essel and Gray and observed that Suho's companions appeared to have grown as well. Essel brightened at the remark, saying she felt stronger after every battle and that her power seemed to be returning little by little. Gray barked in agreement, tail wagging energetically. Suho frowned as he examined their status windows more closely. Something didn't add up. "Since when do you both have levels?" he wondered aloud, disbelief clear in his voice. Essel blinked in surprise and insisted she had never had levels before. The idea confused her. Suho, still puzzling it out, told them their levels. Essel sat at level 19 and Gray at level 17. The revelation only deepened the mystery. He asked whether either of them could see any kind of system window like his, hoping for a clue. Essel shook her head firmly. There was nothing like that for her. Suho let out a breath and folded his arms, thinking. At least, he noted, their stats rose along with their levels. It would have been more useful if they could assign their own stat points, but automatic growth was better than none. Reassured that they were getting stronger, he still felt unsettled by the unexplained mechanics of the system. There were many questions left unanswered, and he was determined to uncover them. A mischievous grin crept onto Suho's face, and he proposed a test. Take the team on more raids to see how their newfound growth behaved. Both Essel and Gray visibly deflated at the idea. They looked exhausted from consecutive runs. Essel groaned, protesting that they had already completed 2 raids back-to-back. Suho laughed at their reactions and raised his hands in mock surrender. He relented and suggested tackling the daily quest instead. Despite their lack of enthusiasm, neither Essel nor Gray continued to argue. Before they could make further plans, Baru stepped forward with a serious caution. He warned the young monarch not to let leveling become an obsession. There were limits and dangers to excessive focus on constant growth. His steady gaze underscored the gravity of his words. Suho's eyes narrowed as the glow intensified and a red gate materialized where nothing had been moments before. The air around it felt oppressive. Heat radiated from the portal. Essel's voice rose in alarm. A gate inside the shadow dungeon? She asked how that could even be possible. Suho frowned, feeling the heat in a different way. The warmth was coming from inside the gate. He turned to Biru and asked whether the Shadow Knight had ever seen gates form inside dungeons. Biru shook his head gravely. This was outside his experience. It was highly unusual, even for them. Before they could investigate more, Suho's system flashed an urgent notification. An urgent quest labeled Dimensional Crack, with the objective to eliminate the source of the breach. The message snapped Suho from confusion to exhilaration. A wide grin crossed his face. This was precisely the kind of opportunity he needed. He rummaged through his inventory, found heat-resistant robes, and handed them to Essel and Gray. He ordered them to don the robes. They were going inside. Essel hesitated at the sight of the ominous red gate, but Suho's confidence steadied her. She drew a deep breath and pulled the robe over her shoulders, and Gray answered with a ready bark. As the group approached the portal, a surge of anticipation coursed through Suho. Whatever lurked beyond that gate, he felt prepared to face it. This was another chance to level up. The system had delivered, and he welcomed it. With determination blazing in his eyes, Suho led them forward to step through the red gate. The scene shifted to a vast desert under the unrelenting glare of an Egyptian sun. Towering dunes rolled outward, and an ancient pyramid rose from the sands, its jagged silhouette casting long shadows across the barren plain. At the forefront stood Liu Xing, a battle-scarred B-rank hunter from the Azura Guild. Frustration carved deep lines into his face as he gripped his sword. His knuckles whitened from the strain. He spat his outrage at the man opposite him, furious that they were being driven away after arriving first. The man remained unmoved, calm and cold. His green eyes glittered with menace as he dismissed Liu Xing's protest. Claims of arrival meant nothing here. Strength decided everything. The stranger offered a final warning. Leave now, or he and his group would make them leave with blood. Liu Xing's jaw tightened and his body tensed for conflict. Inwardly, he cursed the timing. Of all the guilds to clash with, it had to be the Scavenger Guild. The man confronting him was Randolph, an A-rank hunter notorious for brutality and arrogance. Randolph's belief was simple and blunt. Only power mattered. Against overwhelming force, words and rights were irrelevant. Liu Xing glanced at his guildmates. Their weapons had already been drawn, and they stood ready, the air charged with tension. He ordered them to prepare, voice steady despite the danger. Randolph sighed in apparent disappointment and signaled his own team to move in. The standoff was on the brink of violence. Before the first blow fell, a casual voice cut through the standoff and turned every head. A figure stood at the edge of the scene, cloaked in shadow and wearing a mask. Their relaxed posture and offhand question, asking where they had ended up, felt absurdly out of place amid the hostility. Suho, nonchalant and almost amused, had emerged from a red gate 30 minutes earlier, along with his group. The moment they stepped through it, a storm of swirling sand had greeted them. Suho had instinctively shielded his face and muttered that no wonder there was sand blowing from the gate. The environment made itself known instantly. Dunes as far as the eye could see, and a pyramid faint on the horizon. As they scanned the landscape, Suho called it what it was, a desert-type dungeon. Biru, meanwhile, stiffened and focused toward the distant pyramid. He sensed a powerful mana source coming from that direction. Moving closer brought an even stranger surprise. Scattered across the sand were trucks and heavy machinery, objects that made no sense inside a dungeon. Fences, barbed wire, and vehicles marred the natural desert, a jarring sight amidst the ruins. Puzzled, Suho suggested they might have crossed into another world line. Essel inspected a logo printed on a truck, uncertain but open to the possibility that this place was not a typical dungeon. Biru, skeptical, refused to accept that explanation. Something else was clearly at work. Suho resolved to check on the original gate in the Shadow Dungeon. If it still stood there, they would be safe. He slipped briefly back through the portal to confirm. When he returned, his expression had changed, the lightness gone, replaced by a tense unease. Essel stepped forward, cautious, and asked if everything was all right. Suho delivered the alarming truth. The gate was gone. The perspective shifted outward to those waiting outside. Their bored faces crumpled into shock as they watched the red gate vanish into thin air. Panic spread. One onlooker exclaimed that the gate was disappearing. Another wondered aloud if the boss had been defeated. But an injured man sitting further back shook his head. Suho had not emerged. They needed to alert emergency services immediately. Inside the pyramid, Suho moved carefully into the dim interior and found he was not alone. People were already there, the ones operating the trucks he'd seen outside. Relief flickered through him. Perhaps these were the people responsible for the equipment. As he drew closer, he heard them speaking English. A new suspicion clicked into place. Had they somehow crossed into another country? Suho adopted an approachable expression and addressed two of the men in clear English, asking where they were and what the place was. He silently appreciated his college English practice. It now proved useful. One of the men, lean and sharp-featured, narrowed his eyes and registered complication. Another hunter, this time from the east. The man was Liu Xing. Beside Liu stood Randolph, a massive figure armed with a hammer almost as large as his body. He exhaled a long, tired sigh and muttered about the annoyance of so many people converging on the same dungeon. Randolph's thoughts flashed to a prophecy whispered before their arrival. Words about life born from death, a being rising from a fractured seal at the tomb, and power tied to commanding the dead. His master had given strict orders to secure the dungeon ahead of rival groups. Randolph's gaze hardened on Suho. He stepped forward, hammer in hand, and issued an icy warning. If Suho had come for this dungeon, he had one last chance to leave, turn back, or risk being killed. Suho evaluated the situation calmly. He realized without doubt that this was a dungeon, and he could not simply walk away. The urgent quest demanded action. Meeting Randolph's threat, Suho kept his composure and asked what would happen if he refused to retreat. Randolph's mocking smirk curled into fury. He surged forward with speed that belied his size and swung his hammer with devastating force. The strike hit the sand with a thunderous crash, shattering the ground and sending debris in all directions. Even Liu Xing, who knew Randolph's might, flinched at the sheer brutality of the assault. When the dust settled, Randolph searched for his target, but found Suho standing a short distance away, untouched. Calm and composed, Suho had dodged the attack with uncanny precision. He pointed out the obvious. Randolph had attacked first. Suho then closed the distance and delivered a controlled, powerful punch to Randolph's abdomen. The blow landed with a resounding thud. Randolph staggered as his armor cracked under the force. For a brief moment, Randolph's thoughts spun with the realization that Suho's restraint still packed devastating power. If Suho had gone all out, the result would have been catastrophic. Anger replaced shock in Randolph's eyes. He steadied himself and answered with a brutal counterstrike. Moving with surprising agility, he launched a fierce punch that caught Suho off guard and sent him skidding across the sand. Furious, Randolph bellowed at his men and ordered them to slaughter everyone who opposed them. "Spare no one," he commanded. "Leave none from the Azura Guild or those Eastern hunters alive." Around him, Essel and Gray watched with fury etched on their faces. Essel's voice cut through the tumult as she charged forward, enraged that someone had dared to lay a hand on their young monarch. Gray's usual cheerfulness was gone. He moved with deadly intent, every step precise and purposeful. Nearby, Xing clenched his jaw and drew his dual blades. He muttered that it had come to this. A fight was inevitable. Baru moved swiftly to Suho's side, his antennae twitching with agitation. He asked with concern whether the young monarch was unharmed. Suho brushed the sand from his clothes, suppressing a brief wince as he stood tall. Though his voice was calm, the determined glint in his eyes revealed a different story. His gaze scanned the battlefield, taking in the chaos as hunters clashed all around. "We have no choice," Suho thought firmly. To clear the urgent quest, they would have to fight and win. Baru nodded in agreement, bracing himself. The scavenger guild, Suho realized, had made themselves enemies. Without hesitation, Suho sprang into action. He moved with incredible speed, bounding off the ancient pyramid's walls to propel himself forward. Spotting a scavenger guild hunter, he coiled his body like a spring and unleashed a powerful kick aimed directly at the man's face. The impact landed hard, yet the hunter barely flinched, sneering with contempt. He taunted Suho, mocking him for challenging the scavenger guild and claiming he should have obeyed his betters. Suho remained calm, fists clenched at his sides as he considered whether to unleash the ruler's authority and his enhanced techniques. The momentary pause was all the hunter needed to press his attack. Lunging forward with unexpected speed, he aimed to exploit Suho's hesitation. At that instant, Xing appeared, blades flashing as he intercepted the strike. He barked at Suho not to hesitate, holding back the enemy's weapon with sheer force. Suho snapped out of his thoughts, resolve hardening. In one seamless motion, Xing lunged and severed the hunter's neck with precision. The man's lifeless eyes widened in disbelief before his body crumpled into the sands. Suho stood frozen for a moment, processing the brutal finality, before giving Xing a brief nod of thanks. Xing's gaze hardened as he addressed Suho directly, noting that while Suho had dodged Randolph's earlier attack, his hesitation in combat was concerning. He asked whether Suho feared killing, his question cutting through the chaos like a blade. He explained that magic beasts were not the only danger hunters faced. Men like the fallen scavenger guild hunter were often far worse. Survival required steeling oneself against the harsh realities of battle. Suho's mind raced as he stared at the fallen hunter. Am I afraid to kill, he wondered. He had trained to fight and even risk his life. But had he truly prepared for the necessity of taking lives? Memories of past battles flashed through him, times when he had fought fiercely, yet held back against enemies, sparing lives whenever possible. But what if the day came when restraint wasn't an option? His eyes flicked to Essel and Gray, locked in fierce combat nearby. Protecting them might require crossing a line he had never crossed before. A cold determination began to harden in his chest. Xing's voice broke through Suho's thoughts, introducing himself as a member of the Azura Guild. He proposed an alliance against the Scavenger Guild, offering cooperation in the face of their shared enemy. Before Suho could respond, a figure emerged behind Xing, moving with lethal intent. But Suho reacted instantly, striking with speed that left the attacker no chance. The sound of bone-breaking echoed as the assailant was hurled across the sand. Suho lowered his fist, his eyes cold and resolute. He agreed to the alliance, emphasizing that survival left no room for hesitation. The attacker had been dispatched with a single devastating punch, landing near Randolph's feet with a sickening crunch. Blood stained the sand, and Randolph's mild surprise twisted into a sinister grin. His amusement darkened as he regarded Suho. The fight, he decided, would finally be interesting. Suho ignored the taunt, introducing himself simply as Suho from Korea and confirming the alliance with Xing. The battlefield erupted anew as Azura Guild and Scavenger Guild fighters collided. The Azura Guild, energized by Suho's presence, fought with renewed determination, their attacks sharper and resolve stronger. Across the field, Scavenger Guild members sneered at the young monarch's forces. They mocked the Azura Guild's reliance on a few strays and boasted of their superior numbers and strength. Yet Suho remained unfazed. Calmly, he retrieved a key that glimmered ominously and addressed Xing, hinting at the power it could unleash. With one word, he activated it: arise. The ground trembled, and a swirling portal of shadows burst forth, exuding dark, foreboding energy. The battlefield fell silent for a moment, the presence of the shadow dungeon imposing dread on all who witnessed it. Scavenger Guild fighters stared in shock, their bravado evaporating. Xing's jaw dropped as he realized the scale of Suho's power. Not just a fighter, but a summoner commanding a terrifying army. Suho's voice cut through the stunned murmurs, commanding his shadow army to attack. The horde surged forward, roaring in unison, and chaos engulfed the battlefield. Randolph, massive and imposing, held firm amidst the carnage, sneering at Suho's display. He admitted Suho had been hiding his true power and resumed his assault, swinging his colossal hammer and obliterating a massive shadow spider in one stroke. He carved through the ranks with relentless force, leaving destruction in his wake. Baru, observing the devastation, warned Suho that Randolph was no ordinary foe. Suho's jaw clenched, his mind raced. He ordered Gray to initiate the bonding skill. But before they could act, Essel stepped forward, determined to assist. She claimed to have discovered a way to enhance the bonding rate, insisting she could make a real difference. Gray bristled in disagreement, fists clenched, but Essel's resolve remained unshaken. Suho hesitated, weighing the decision. Time was slipping, and Randolph continued cutting through their forces with terrifying efficiency. Finally, Suho nodded. As they prepared, the ground trembled violently. From the shadowy depths of the dungeon, mummified figures emerged, their hollow, glowing eyes casting an eerie light. They shuffled forward in unnerving unison, radiating malice. Xing struck at one, wondering if the mummies had been drawn to the noise of the battle. Essel warned Suho urgently. The other exit was blocked, and they were surrounded on all sides. Across the battlefield, Randolph observed the approaching mummies with a calculating glare. A smirk twisted his lips as he muttered under his breath, realizing the meaning of the prophecy. The one born from death, the one who had shattered the seal and commanded the dead from the grave. His gaze flicked towards Suho, and a glint of grim understanding crossed his eyes. We can't fight them. It's a waste of time. We just need to secure the dungeon ownership we ordered for the boss. The weight of his realization heavy. Straightening, Randolph barked orders to his guild. He commanded them to forget the other hunters and head straight for the boss room. Xing, still engaged in combat, noticed the scavenger guild forcing their way forward. His eyes narrowed as he shouted towards Suho, warning that the guild was heading for the boss room and attempting to steal the dungeon from under them. Suho's jaw tightened as he assessed the situation. His gaze darted between the advancing mummies and the retreating scavenger guild. We can't let that happen, he resolved firmly. Turning to Gray, Suho said with finality that it was time to use the bonding skill. As Suho prepared to activate the bonding skill, the dungeon seemed to resist their advance. A massive, decaying mummy lunged toward him, claws outstretched with lethal intent. Without hesitation, Suho channeled his resolve into action. Each step carried purpose, every movement precise. He sidestepped the mummy with agility, his body moving in a blur as he unleashed a devastating flurry of attacks. His strikes were so swift and powerful that the mummies disintegrated almost instantly, collapsing into heaps of dust before they could respond. Standing amidst the remnants of his foes, Suho's eyes glinted with fierce resolve. He scanned the battlefield, ready for whatever challenge awaited next. Xing, watching from nearby, could only gape, awe and disbelief etched across his face. He muttered under his breath that Suho not only commanded an army, but could merge with his creatures as well, and still wasn't revealing his full power. Suspicion and admiration mingled in his gaze. Who is he really? What secrets is he hiding? At the edge of the fray, Essel stood silently, her heart heavy. Once again, she had been left behind, unable to fight at Suho's side. Suho's gaze flickered toward her briefly, softening for a fleeting moment. But the urgency of the battle pressed him, and his demeanor hardened once more. No more wasting time, he declared, voice firm and commanding. Let's finish this and catch up to them. Meanwhile, deeper within the dungeon's labyrinthine corridors, the scavenger guild advanced with ruthless precision. They tore through the mummies blocking their path, each hunter driven by Randolph's relentless determination. At the front, Randolph's thoughts repeatedly returned to Suho. Something about the young hunter didn't sit right with him. That kid, he mused, fists clenching. He's not just another hunter. There's something different about him. And once we claim this dungeon, I'll see exactly what he's capable of. Finally, the guild reached a massive, ancient door. Its surface was etched with warped symbols that pulsed faintly, almost alive with sinister energy. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances. Randolph raised his hand, signaling them forward. The door groaned open, chains grinding ominously as it revealed the chamber beyond. A chilling sight awaited them. At the far end, a colossal figure loomed, bound tightly to the walls by thick, enchanted chains. Its sheer size and aura radiated danger even in dormancy. Randolph froze, eyes narrowing in disbelief. Chained? He murmured. Why would a dungeon boss be restrained like this? What are we dealing with? The other hunters whispered among themselves, confidence faltering. Some speculated the creature slept. Randolph stepped forward, jaw set. Whatever it is, we'll face it. Prepare yourselves, he commanded, though a flicker of doubt lingered. His mind recalled the prophecy. The being born of death, who shatters the seal, will rise. A chill ran down his spine as the figure stirred. The monstrous entity twitched, guttural ancient words spilling from its mouth. Each syllable carried an ominous weight, echoing across the dungeon walls. The chains trembled violently, rattling under the immense force within. Then with a deafening crack, the restraints shattered, splintering like brittle glass. Randolph spun sharply to face his guild, his voice slicing through the chaos. He commanded them with authority, insisting there could be no holding back. Everyone must fight with everything they had. The dungeon boss wasted no time. It swung its broken chains like deadly weapons, tearing through the hunters with terrifying precision. Each strike sent shockwaves across the chamber, slamming guild members into stone walls and the floor. Blood and dust clouded the room as even the strongest tank hunters, who prided themselves on impenetrable defenses, collapsed under the relentless assault. Randolph's teeth clenched as he witnessed the carnage. The guild's finest fighters, the ones he had considered unbeatable, lay broken and defeated, the boss's glowing eyes fixed on him. Slowly the creature approached, each massive step echoing through the chamber. It stopped directly in front of Randolph, towering over him. It spread its massive arms wide as if daring him to attack, a mocking gesture that ignited a surge of anger in Randolph's chest. "You're mocking me," he growled, pride and fury mingling. His hands tightened around his hammer. "I'll make you regret this." With a roar, Randolph activated his ultimate skill, Giant's Armor. A green, pulsating aura enveloped him as his body surged with newfound power. His muscles bulged, and his size increased, radiating overwhelming strength. Channeling all his energy, he swung the hammer with every ounce of force he could muster, aiming for the boss's chest. The impact shook the chamber, sending a reverberating shockwave through the dungeon. But the monster remained unmoved, solid as a mountain. The attacks that had toppled countless others had no effect. Randolph's heart sank, and sweat dripped down his face as the realization struck him. "Impossible," he muttered, chest tightening. He had poured everything into that strike, and it had failed. The dungeon boss let out a low, guttural laugh, dripping with cruel amusement. Its glowing eyes narrowed, and one massive fist crackled with dark, otherworldly energy. Terror washed over Randolph. He whispered faintly, "Master, forgive me." I should have waited. It was too late. The monster's fist descended, slamming Randolph into the far wall with a cataclysmic force. The sound of shattering stone echoed through the chamber as Randolph's body crumpled, half mangled beyond recognition. The dungeon boss stood tall, triumphant, its gaze cold as it observed Randolph's shattered form. "The first human to reach me?" It rumbled disdainfully, and he barely lasted a heartbeat. How pitiful. Its attention shifted toward the chamber entrance. Its glowing eyes gleamed with malicious anticipation. "But there are more intruders in these depths, aren't there? Let's see if they provide better entertainment." Elsewhere, Suho fought relentlessly. Each punch and kick landed with lethal precision, mummies disintegrating into dust under the force of his blows. The battlefield was chaotic, but Suho moved with the focus of a storm, a blur of calculated fury. Yet no matter how many he defeated, more continued to rise from the shadows. "They just won't stop," Suho muttered, frustration bubbling beneath his composed exterior. His gaze swept across the battlefield, seeking a way to shift the tide. A sudden thought struck him. He decided to test shadow extraction on one of the defeated mummies. Extending his hand, he activated his ability, but instead of the familiar surge of energy, a cold, mechanical response echoed in his mind. Shadow extraction failed. Old souls cannot be extracted. Suho frowned, confusion flickering across his face. Old souls. So I can't extract them either. First demons, now this. These restrictions are becoming problematic. Behind him, Baru remained silent, antennae twitching, his gaze unwavering. Though he said nothing, his presence reminded Suho of the strength he could still rely on. Suddenly, the ground trembled. The vibration started faint but quickly escalated into violent quakes. Suho froze, instinct screaming that something was gravely wrong. Jagged cracks snaked across the stone floor as the dungeon itself seemed to rebel. Without warning, the ground collapsed into a yawning chasm. Suho and scattered Azura Guild members fell, their shouts merging with the roar of crumbling stone. From the depths erupted a monstrous centipede-like creature. Its segmented metallic body glistened under the dim dungeon light, towering above them with countless legs writhing rhythmically. Its glowing eyes locked on Suho and the hunters, radiating pure malice. A piercing screech echoed through the cavern, sending shivers down the spines of everyone present. Hunters exchanged uneasy glances. As if waves of mummies weren't enough. Now they faced this nightmare. The centipede lunged forward with shocking speed, its massive, segmented body moving faster than seemed possible. Hunters scattered in desperation. Some barely avoided its strike, while others were sent flying like rag dolls. Screams and the sound of breaking bones echoed across the battlefield. Essel's eyes locked onto the creature's movements. Seizing an opening, she lunged with precision, spear aimed at its armored flank. The blade struck, but glanced off the hardened exoskeleton, leaving only a faint scratch. Frustration flashed across her face as she withdrew. Its armor is too strong. My attacks can't get through, she shouted, voice cutting through the chaos with equal parts determination and concern. Nearby, Xing fought through waves of mummies, but his gaze kept darting toward Suho. Grim, he called out. This is spiraling out of control. We're overrun, and the Scavenger Guild has seized the upper hand in the dungeon. It's only getting worse. Ducking under the centipede's mandibles, Suho nodded gravely. You're right. We may need to pull back. But inside, his thoughts churned. The urgent quest to resolve the dimensional crack still loomed. Could he trust the Scavenger Guild to handle it, or even complete the mission? Doubt tightened in his chest. Is retreating really the answer? Before he could decide, a suffocating aura swept across the battlefield. Dust thickened and the air grew heavy, signaling the arrival of something far more ominous. From the direction of the Scavenger Guild, a towering figure emerged through the haze. Its oppressive energy radiated dark malice, freezing every hunter in place. Xing's face turned pale as he stared at the advancing figure, trembling. The boss? It's coming from where the Scavenger Guild went, he stammered. Suho's gaze fixed on the approaching monster, mind racing while body instinctively tensed. Suho felt the overwhelming presence of the monster, an oppressive force that pressed against his very being. Fear whispered in his mind. Suho wondered, keeping his eyes locked on the entity before him. Above the towering figure, a name glowed in ominous red, pulsing with an aura of calamity. Amit, the prisoner of the tomb. This was no ordinary dungeon boss. It was a harbinger of destruction, a being born of pure malice. The darkness surrounding Amit seemed almost alive, a tangible shadow that twisted and writhed as if it had a will of its own. With an air of unchallenged authority, Amit's glowing eyes scanned the battlefield, briefly resting on the mummies that had attacked relentlessly moments ago. His deep, resonant voice carried a command that rippled through the air. Disappear. The single word carried undeniable authority. The mummies faltered instantly, their previously unrelenting aggression crumbling into terror. They scurried away, fleeing from the presence of Amit. Essel, standing amid the chaos, felt her breath hitch. Fingers tightening around her spear, she whispered, "Did that thing just speak? And the mummies obey it." Before anyone could respond, Amit's massive form descended to the ground near her, the impact cracking the earth beneath his feet. Shadows from his form enveloped Essel, and despite her battle-hardened resolve, a cold sweat formed on her brow. Suho shouted for her to retreat, urgency edging his voice, but Amit's glowing eyes fixed on her, and she froze in place. To her astonishment, Amit spoke again, not in a human tongue, but in the guttural, ancient language of monsters. "You understand my words." His tone carried curiosity rather than hostility, amplifying her unease. Steeling herself, Essel gripped her spear and replied, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Yes, I am of the demon race." A low, chilling laugh rumbled from Amit, a mix of amusement and menace. "How long has it been since I encountered a creature capable of understanding me?" he mused. "Day after day, I've been surrounded by mindless, dead things and insignificant insects crawling through the desert. For a fleeting moment, Essel dared hope. Maybe he isn't as hostile as he seems, she thought, but her hope vanished instantly when a massive centipede lunged at her from behind. She barely had time to react before Amit's arm lashed out with blinding speed, releasing a shock wave that obliterated the centipede, scattering its remains across the battlefield. Essel stood frozen, trying to process the raw power she had just witnessed. What is this creature? Her fear multiplied tenfold. Amit's gaze returned to her briefly, his disdain clear. Before we continue, I must deal with these vermin who ignore my warnings. With that, he surged forward like a bolt of darkness, striking another giant centipede with devastating precision. The monster cleaved it in two, its massive body collapsing lifelessly. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining Azura Guild members watched in stunned disbelief, awe and terror etched into their faces. Amit stood in the center of the carnage, a dark force that none dared challenge. Suho froze, thoughts spinning. A monster, fighting other monsters. What kind of nightmare is this? Before he could ponder further, another centipede lunged from above, jaws snapping shut around Amit. Gasps rippled across the battlefield as the creature's fangs enveloped Amit, swallowing him in its gruesome maw. For a tense moment, silence fell. Then a horrifying transformation occurred. The centipede's body writhed violently, insides twisting in unnatural shapes. Wet, tearing sounds echoed as Amit tore himself free, emerging drenched in the creature's blood. Calmly, he wiped his face and muttered, "I despise insects." An oppressive silence descended. Amit stood amid the battlefield, a walking embodiment of death, suffocating in his presence. Xing's face was pale as he muttered to himself, voice trembling. A monster, capable of slaughtering other monsters effortlessly. What kind of being is Amit? And why is he here? His gaze flicked to the shredded centipedes, hands trembling. This dungeon was supposed to be a standard investigation. But this is far beyond anything we understand. Amit turned his gaze toward Xing, narrowing his eyes. A faint spark of malice lit his expression. Another who cannot understand me? How tiresome. Without warning, Amit surged forward, his speed beyond comprehension. You must die, he declared, voice cold and unwavering. Xing barely had time to cross his blades in a desperate attempt to block the attack. The sheer force of Amit's charge made the air itself vibrate. Essel's voice rang out in a sharp plea, cutting through the tension. Suho had thrown himself into the fray, landing a solid punch against Amu's side in defiance. Attacking us because we can't communicate, Suho shouted, voice intense. What kind of twisted values do you hold? Amu paused, the force of Suho's blow barely making an impression. He tilted his head, scrutinizing the young hunter with interest. A human who speaks of values, he mused, voice dripping with disdain. Without warning, Amu retaliated. His punch landed with brutal force, shaking the room and sending shockwaves through the ground. Debris erupted, shards of stone scattering as guild members scrambled for cover. Suho bore the brunt, hurtling through the air before slamming into the dungeon wall with a thunderous crack. Essel's heart clenched. She cried out, sharp and furious, "Young monarch!" Her gaze locked on Amu, venom in her tone. "You fiend! How dare you strike the young monarch?" Amu responded with a low, mocking laugh. "That human. He's your ally, then." The edges of his tone softened slightly. "Consider this mercy," Amu said. "I'll spare you for now. If you truly hail from the demon race, you may hold knowledge that intrigues me." Amu's gaze bore down on Essel with an intensity that pinned her in place. "Tell me," Amu demanded, each word slicing through the tension, "is the war between the other monarchs and the Shadow Monarch over? And if so, who emerged victorious?" Essel's face remained firm, though sweat trickled down her temple. Her mind raced, struggling to comprehend the implications of Amu's knowledge. How did this creature know of the monarch's war? Who or what was he? Around them, the battlefield was strewn with the fallen. Suho and Gray lay crumpled near the dungeon wall, battered and broken. The strain of their battle had pushed their bonding skill to its absolute limit, leaving Gray unconscious and Suho barely clinging to life. Baru knelt beside them, his normally composed expression tinged with rare concern. Amu's gaze returned to Essel, voice cold and unyielding as steel. "So you refuse to answer," he said, disdain dripping from his words. "It matters not whether you are a mindless beast or a demon who chooses silence. To me, you are all the same." With that, he lifted his massive foot high, a terrifying promise of devastation. "You all must die," Amit's voice thundered across the dungeon, laden with merciless intent. Darkness radiated from his towering figure. Amidst the chaos, Suho lay sprawled on the ground, battered and bleeding. Yet even as pain racked his body, his resolve remained unbroken. With immense effort, he whispered hoarsely, "Claim reward. Status recovery." A soft green light flared behind Amit, enveloping Suho. The glow mended his wounds, easing the pain and replenishing his strength. Renewed vitality coursed through him as he pushed himself to his feet, gripping his shoulder for balance. A faint smirk appeared. "Good thing I saved my daily quest rewards," he muttered under his breath, relief flickering in his voice. His eyes locked on Amit, now steeled with determination. "If you're asking about the Great War of the Monarchs," Suho began, voice steady, "let me tell you, every last one of them fell to the Shadow Monarch." Essel's voice pierced the tense air, sharp and urgent. "Young Monarch." Her tone carried worry and alarm. Amit's glowing eyes narrowed, a spark of surprise flashing across his face. He stepped forward, towering over the battlefield, curiosity mingling with menace. "Is that so?" he asked, a mix of disbelief and fascination in his tone. "While I languished in this cursed prison, the War of the Monarchs ended." Suho's gaze remained unwavering, his voice firm. "That's the truth." Inside, his mind raced. This creature knew about the Monarch's war. Could he be connected to one of them? His jaw tightened. He was powerful, S rank at least. Maybe stronger. Provoking him could mean death. Amit's eyes glimmered dangerously as he closed the distance. His voice dropped to a low, menacing growl. "So, the Shadow Monarch triumphed. That means he killed them all. Even Tarnak, the Monarch of the Iron Body." A sinister red aura seeped from Amit, spreading like fog throughout the dungeon. His shadow expanded, engulfing Suho as he loomed over him. "Are you certain?" Amit demanded, eyes burning with intensity. "Are you truly telling me the truth? Did the Shadow Monarch kill Tarnak, the Monarch of the Iron Body?" Suho's fists clenched. The Monarch of the Iron Body. Could this creature be tied to him? His mind raced, worry gnawing at him. If Amit discovered who his father was, the destruction unleashed could be catastrophic. Amit had no patience for Suho's hesitation. Without warning, his massive foot came crashing down like a meteor. "Young Monarch, look out!" Essel shouted, panic cutting through the air. The impact shattered the ground, sending tremors through the dungeon. Cracks raced up the walls, dust and debris filling the air. Suho barely evaded the strike, flipping backward just in time, heart pounding and exhaling sharply. "What the hell, man?" Suho shouted in frustration. "I thought we were talking." Amit's glowing eyes narrowed. His voice rumbled like grinding stones. "You are taking too long. Only liars hesitate." His towering form closed in, threat unmistakable. "Speak the truth now, or I will crush you where you stand." Suho swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down. "He's not bluffing. One wrong word and I'm dead." Amit's voice boomed again, colder than before. "Answer me. Did Tarnak, the Monarch of the Iron Body, fall to the Shadow Monarch or not?" Suho did not falter. "Yes," he said firmly. "The Shadow Monarch killed every one of the monarchs." Suho braced himself, expecting an explosion of rage. But instead, Amit's face twisted into a grin. Then a booming laugh erupted from him, deep and thunderous, shaking the dungeon walls. "So that's it," Amit said between laughs, a note of relief in his tone. "That's why he never returned for me." He spread his arms wide, shadowing the room with his massive figure. The great Tarnak, the mighty monarch of the Iron Body. He really met his end. The tension of the room had shifted into an eerie unease at Amit's bizarre reaction. "I suppose I owe the Shadow Monarch a toast," Amit mused. Suho, gathering courage, asked the question on his mind. "Wait, Weren't you kin to the Iron Monarch? Amit's laughter cut off instantly. His expression darkened, eyes narrowing with venom. He hissed, voice dripping with contempt. Do not dare accuse me of such filth. His massive hands clenched, crackling with violent energy. Kin, how dare you insult me with such blasphemy? You have gone too far, he snarled, and now you will die for it. Before Suho could react, Amit lunged, his fist aimed directly at him, carrying an unstoppable force. Suho crossed his arms defensively, aware that it might not be enough. Then something extraordinary happened. From the shadows of the dungeon, chains shot forth, thick, radiant, pulsating with otherworldly energy. They moved with impossible speed, wrapping around Amit like vipers striking prey. His fist froze inches from Suho's face, suspended by the chain's unyielding grip. Suho stumbled back, breath caught in disbelief. Where did these come from? He whispered. Amit struggled, his rage turning to grim realization. Each attempt to break free only tightened the chains further. These damn chains, Amit growled. Again! They come to haunt me. Have I overstepped once more? But the chains were relentless, pulling him back toward the void that had once imprisoned him. The room echoed with grinding metal as the chain's unyielding purpose became clear. Amit's defiance was futile. Not again, he snarled, muscles straining against the chains. Yet the unrelenting force dragged him backward, a reminder that even his power had limits. Amit stumbled, his enormous frame straining against the merciless chains that bound him. Every step backward felt like an eternity, and his frustrated roars echoed through the dungeon. Yet the chains held firm, dragging him relentlessly back toward the domain he had tried to escape. With a deafening roar, Amit cursed the bindings, the memory of Tarnak, and the mysterious spellcaster who had sentenced him to this eternal torment. Despite his struggles, the chains did not loosen. Shadows surged around him, swallowing his massive form until he vanished completely, leaving only a swirling cloud of dust behind. Suho remained frozen in place, breathing shallow and his expression locked in disbelief. His wide eyes and slack jaw revealed his inability to comprehend what had just taken place. Questions raced through his mind. Where had the chains come from, and why had they suddenly ensnared such a powerful creature? Seoul hurried to his side, her face pale with worry. She reached out and asked if the young monarch was all right, her voice trembling with concern. Suho nodded briefly but concealed the turmoil inside. He responded tersely that he was fine, though his thoughts told a different story. Relief washed over him, not because he understood what had happened, but simply because Amit was gone. He reminded Seoul that now they had confirmed the creature's existence, they needed to proceed with caution. Their immediate priority, he said, was to assist Gray and the injured members of the Azura Guild. Just as he finished speaking, Suho's expression suddenly changed. His eyes widened in shock and his lips parted as the system's interface flickered uncontrollably. The urgent quest text distorted in a way he had never seen before, causing alarm to prick at him as he tried to make sense of the unexpected glitch. Noticing Suho's unease, Seoul stepped closer, her concern deepening. She asked again what was wrong, her voice tight with worry. Suho focused on the flickering screen and pointed it out to her, frustration evident in his features. The emergency quest had changed on its own. He read the new prompt aloud, disbelief evident in his tone. Free the heir of the iron body, Amit, from the pyramid. The words echoed in his mind like a distant tolling bell. Amit, the heir of the iron body. Suho's thoughts raced as he struggled to grasp the reality of this revelation. He wondered to himself if what he was seeing was real. The scene shifted to inside a chamber. Scattered across the cold stone floor were the mangled remains of the Scavenger Guild members. Blood pooled in deep crimson patches, staining the ground, and the acrid stench of death made every breath a struggle. As Suho and Seoul stepped inside, their eyes were immediately drawn to the carnage. Suho's expression hardened as he grasped the grim reality before him. The Scavenger Guild members had been slaughtered mercilessly. He realized with a sinking feeling that Amit must have been the one responsible. At the center of the chamber loomed a massive figure, bound tightly by a web of glowing chains. The faintly pulsing light cast long, distorted shadows across the walls. Amit's piercing gaze met Suho's, a mixture of disdain and intrigue reflecting in his eyes. As he shifted, the chains creaked ominously, and a low, dark amusement resonated from him. Amit's mind registered disbelief that Suho had come searching for him. He noted the human's audacity and wondered whether it would be his undoing. Despite the danger, Suho approached calmly, his face unreadable, determined to finish what had been left unresolved. The conversation that had been cut short before now lingered in his thoughts. Amit scoffed, his laughter low and menacing, echoing like distant thunder across the chamber. He dismissed the idea of conversation, stating that Tarnak had only taught him the art of killing. Any grievances Suho had, Amit implied, should be directed at Tarnak's grave. Suho, observing the beast's blunt and almost childlike honesty beneath its terrifying presence, pressed on carefully. He questioned Amit's lack of regard for the monarch of the iron body, noting the apparent resentment in his tone. Amit's eyes flickered with surprise, the chains rattling with the movement. He revealed that talking was the only pastime left to him and reluctantly decided to indulge Suho's questions. Amit explained that he had been created by Tarnak, the monarch of the iron body, and an unnamed spellcaster. Forged into the being he had become, he had then been abandoned, entombed in the cursed prison like a broken tool. The weight of his words was heavy, and Suho could feel the raw pain and fury radiating from him. His voice grew colder as he recounted the torment he had endured. Tarnak and the spellcaster had transformed him into a monster and left him chained amidst a tomb of rotting corpses. Suho, pondering the depth of Amit's suffering, asked why he had not broken the chains. Amit's glare sharpened, and he leaned forward, straining against the chains. He explained that the bindings were not ordinary. They were woven with powerful magic. No matter how many times he destroyed them, the chains would reform if he moved too far from his prison. Centuries of attempts had failed, leaving him trapped and unable to explore the tomb, his rage and frustration echoing in every word. Suho studied the chains carefully. Something about their design did not add up. If they were truly unbreakable, why were they enchanted to reform only at a distance? There had to be a purpose behind the spell. Turning back to Amit, Suho asked whether the monsters in the tomb had been present when he was imprisoned. Amit's expression darkened further as he confirmed that they had always been there, his tone dripping with bitterness. Suho pieced together the puzzle, realizing that Amit was not the dungeon's master. Essel, standing nearby, shared his confusion. Suho pressed further, confirming his suspicions. Amit's acknowledgement triggered a wave of realization in Suho. The chains were designed with a purpose beyond mere imprisonment. After a moment of contemplation, Suho stepped forward boldly. He proposed that if he could break the chains, Amit should be willing to hear him out. Amit's eyes widened, a flicker of hope crossing his otherwise wary expression. He questioned Suho's seriousness, his voice heavy with disbelief. Yet he promised that if the spellcaster's work were undone, he would grant any request made of him. Amit's aura suddenly erupted like a storm, filling the chamber with an oppressive force that made the walls tremble. The chains groaned under the strain, as if they too feared his wrath. His eyes gleamed with a feral light, and his guttural roar shook the very ground. Threats of immense destruction hung in the air, warning that any deception would cost Suho dearly. The swirling green and crimson energy around Amit pulsed violently, enveloping his massive form in chaotic fury. The room grew oppressively hot, the electricity in the air thickening the tension. Essel froze, her face pale and eyes wide, overwhelmed by Amit's terrifying presence. Suho, however, raised a hand to calm her and focused solely on Amit, maintaining his unwavering gaze. Every muscle in his body was tense, yet his voice remained steady as he urged the creature to hear him out before making threats. Amit's low growl resonated through the chamber, yet he hesitated, curiosity taking root in his mind. Suho leaned forward, a sly glint in his eyes, and revealed his plan to collapse the entire dungeon. Amit's fury shifted to intrigue as he considered the young monarch's bold strategy. Suho explained that the chains had been enchanted to prevent him from reaching the dungeon master. But once the master was defeated and the dungeon collapsed, the chains would lose their purpose and break. Amit's eyes darkened as he processed this logic, hope slowly replacing the fury that had consumed him for centuries. A low rumble escaped his chest, building into a guttural laugh that filled the chamber. The Shadow Monarch's heir, Amit realized, had devised a plan that might actually succeed. Meanwhile, in the lower levels of the dungeon, Baru buzzed around angrily, flapping his wings and lamenting Suho's apparent abandonment. He exaggerated his misery, calling out about being left with an oversized lizard. Amit, growing annoyed, snapped at the insect, dismissing its whining as insignificant. Baru bristled, indignation flashing across his tiny frame, but Amit remained unimpressed, dismissing the threats with a grunt. Amit moved to the edge of his chain's reach, pressing his massive hand against the cold dungeon floor as he watched the shadows where Suho had vanished. Though still bound, he allowed himself a rare moment of belief in Suho's plan. For the first time in centuries, vulnerability crossed his face. He reflected bitterly on Tarnak's teachings, which had valued raw power above all else. Yet looking at Suho, Amit admitted to himself that there was strength beyond brute force, and if anyone could break these chains, it was that young man. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Suho's fist collided with the jaw of a towering beast. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, and the creature's head snapped backward before crumbling into dust under the sheer force of his strike. Without hesitation, Suho pivoted, delivering a final, devastating blow to the remaining creatures that swarmed him. Dust and dissipating energy filled the air as the last of the monsters fell. Standing amidst the wreckage, Suho's chest rose and fell with controlled breaths. The battlefield had gone silent, the only sound the faint crackle of fading magic. He cast a glance toward Essel, who had been fighting fiercely at his side. Both were weary, their bodies marked by the relentless combat. Together they pressed forward, advancing toward the dungeon's core. There, an ominous figure loomed upon a throne constructed from the bones of countless fallen foes. A malevolent aura seeped from the seated figure, suffocating the air around them. Suho's gaze sharpened as he read the crimson letters floating above the throne. The name of the dungeon's warden, Shika. "Just one more," Suho murmured under his breath, his voice steady and low. His muscles tensed, every nerve coiled, ready for the decisive strike. Suho, his thoughts drifting into the past within Amit's chamber, watched as Amit struggled against the enchanted bindings that had restrained him for what felt like an eternity. Suho, observing the futile efforts, conjured a shadow portal within Amit's reach. Hope flared in Amit's eyes as he lunged, but the cursed chains recoiled with ruthless force, dragging him back into the prison. Suho watched calmly, analyzing the chain's magic. As expected, he muttered, the chains were more troublesome than anticipated. Even the shadow portal could not bypass their enchantment. Amit gritted his teeth, his massive hands gripping the chains as frustration welled up. Every attempt to move beyond the prison tightened their grip. It was as if he were trapped in an unending nightmare. Suho crossed his arms, studying the chains with precision. A formidable spell indeed, he acknowledged silently. But testing its limits was necessary to understand its design fully. Turning to Essel and the others, Suho explained their plan. First, he and Essel would confront the dungeon's boss, destabilizing the core and initiating the dungeon's collapse. Once the dungeon began to crumble, the next objective was to target the pillars anchoring the chains, severing them to finally free Amit. With the strategy set, Suho's tone carried calm finality. Once the dungeon collapsed, the team would regroup with Baru and retreat into the shadow dungeon before the structure disintegrated entirely. Amit's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. He questioned the plan's reliability. Suho's expression hardened, his voice steady and resolute. Contingencies existed for any deviation, he assured. Amit's response was a sardonic chuckle, echoing through the stone corridors. The chains rattled ominously as he muttered that whatever awaited outside could not be worse than another 1,000 years rotting in the cursed crypt. In the present, at the dungeon's core, a swirling wind rushed through the ancient corridors, lifting sand into restless whirlwinds. At its center stood Shika, the tomb's guardian, framed by an ominous crimson glow. Dark energy pulsed within an orb he held, tendrils of red lightning flickering across its surface. With a flick of his wrist, the orb exploded midair, spawning a horde of sand-born monstrosities. The creatures surged forward like a living avalanche, their twisted forms barreling towards Suho with feral hunger. Suho's grip on his blade tightened, and with unwavering determination, he lunged into the wave of monsters. His sword became a blur, slicing through the sand beasts with surgical precision. Each strike disintegrated the creatures into dust, the swirling storm concealing him within its chaos. Breaking through the haze, Suho emerged, cleaving the final monster in half with a single decisive strike. Just as he allowed himself a breath, the sand beneath his feet twisted violently, coiling like serpents and gripping him tightly. His eyes flicked toward Sheikah, who remained atop the throne of bones, one hand extended. At his subtle gesture, the sand responded, binding Suho like a marionette. Floating crimson letters above Sheikah's head reminded Suho of the threat before him, an A-rank dungeon guardian. He murmured under his breath that this would not be easy. From the corner of his eye, Suho saw Essel seizing an opening. With determination, she hurled her spear at Sheikah, her aim precise and powerful. But Sheikah remained indifferent. With a mere flick of his hand, the spear veered off course, striking the ground harmlessly, while Suho's focus remained unbroken. He realized this battle was not just about strength. Sheikah controlled the dungeon itself, and the sand constricting him tightened further, threatening to pull him into the storm's depths. Clenching his teeth, Suho summoned every ounce of his strength, channeling it into a single explosive burst. The sand shattered away from his legs, dispersing like smoke in the wind. Gasping for breath amidst the howling dungeon storm, Suho shouted over the chaos, his voice cutting through the wind like steel. He called for Essel, signaling that now was the time to activate the bond skill. Essel hesitated for just a heartbeat, her eyes widening at the command, but understanding quickly overtook her surprise. Determination flashed across her features as she summoned the depths of her power. Her hair transformed into a dazzling white, glowing like moonlight against the dungeon's oppressive darkness, while a dark crimson aura pulsed around her body, crackling with raw energy. She gathered this power into a blazing red sphere, her focus absolute. Memories of past failures flitted across her mind, but she pushed them aside, jaw set with grim resolve. This time, she told herself, she would not falter. She thrust the energy forward towards Suho, and the orb surged into him like a lightning strike, electrifying every nerve in his body. Essel's aura dimmed instantly, her mana completely drained. She crumpled to the ground, whispering faintly, her voice barely audible, expressing hope that her effort would be enough. Suho felt the torrent of power surge through him, invigorating his body and sharpening his senses. With Essel's bond skill fueling him, he exploded into motion. His body became a blur, moving faster than the eye could follow as he hurtled toward Sheikah. The dungeon walls trembled beneath his feet, and the ground quaked in anticipation of the impending collision. Sheikah remained unmoved, his expression unreadable. As Suho closed the distance, the warden raised a hand, crimson energy flaring violently, preparing a devastating counterattack. Suho pressed forward, his resolve burning brighter than the oppressive aura surrounding Sheikah. A system notification flickered in his vision. Bond skill, Demon Blast, 67% charge. Suho's mind raced. This was his one chance, the moment to strike without hesitation. Clenching his fists, he felt the energy surge through him like molten fire. Letting out a primal roar that echoed through the crumbling tomb, he channeled all his strength into a single earth-shattering punch. The impact was cataclysmic. A massive shockwave tore through the dungeon, blasting shards of stone and bone in every direction. Sheikah's form disintegrated under the force, fracturing into countless fragments before vanishing entirely. Far deeper in the dungeon, Baru's antennae quivered as the ground trembled. Cracks raced up the walls, dust fell from the ceilings, and the oppressive atmosphere shifted as the dungeon itself groaned and began to collapse. Baru's voice rang urgently as he called out to Amit, warning that the young monarch had defeated the dungeon master. Amit's gaze followed the loosening stakes that had bound his chains, each clattering to the ground. A faint spark of hope flickered within him for the first time in centuries. He murmured barely above a whisper, questioning if he was truly free. Memories of his long imprisonment surged. Tarnak's twisted grin, the cruel spellcaster's experiments, the endless cycles of being broken and rebuilt. He remembered gouging out his own eyes in a desperate bid for freedom, yet now hope bloomed within him as the dungeon crumbled around him. With a deep, shuddering breath, Amit lifted his massive foot and stepped beyond the threshold of his prison, but freedom came with an immediate threat. From the shadows, a gleaming stake shot toward him like lightning, impaling his side with brutal precision. He staggered, roaring in pain as blood stained his fangs. Baru flapped his wings frantically, panicking at the sudden assault. Amit barely registered Baru's cries. Stakes continued to fly at him like a storm, sharp and relentless. His roar echoed through the tomb, filled with fury and disbelief. Tarnak, the spellcaster. He would rather see him dead than free, Amit realized, his voice thick with bitterness. Just as another stake spiraled toward him, Suho arrived, battered but undeterred. Acting instinctively, he positioned himself between Amit and the deadly projectiles. He spun mid-air, striking the stakes with precise blows, redirecting them into the shadow portal he conjured. Each impact sent waves of pain through his body, but he pressed on, unwavering. Amit watched Suho's relentless defense, confusion and awe flooding him. He questioned why Suho risked everything for him, but Suho did not answer. His actions spoke louder than words. A final stake zeroed in on Suho's heart. Exhausted, he could barely react. At that moment, Amit surged forward, smashing the stake into the shadow portal with a deafening clang. Blood flowed from his wounds, but his eyes burned with newfound fire. Amit's voice, though ragged, carried clarity and gratitude. And as he spoke to Suho, a deep respect formed between them. He no longer saw Suho as an opponent, but as a comrade, bound by shared struggle. Together, side by side, Suho and Amit faced the relentless barrage of enchanted stakes. Amit swung his colossal fists, hurling the projectiles into the shadow portal. Suho, despite his battered body, mirrored the effort, striking each incoming stake with precise, desperate determination. Later, deep within the shadow dungeon, Essel stirred, weak but conscious. Baru, unamused, chastised her dryly for taking so long to awaken. Essel's eyes widened as she saw Suho and Amit lying nearby, victorious and unharmed. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered in disbelief that the young monarch had indeed saved Amit. System notifications appeared above Suho's resting form. Congratulations. You have successfully recruited Amit, heir of the Iron Body, as a companion. Urgent quest, dimensional crack, completed. You have leveled up. Quest rewards acquired. The scene shift to a chairman's office. Jin-chul sat quietly in a sleek black suit, sipping his tea with careful deliberation. The soft glow from his tablet illuminated his face, revealing eyes sharp and calculating as they lingered on a profile. Sung Jinwoo image frozen on the screen. A mix of admiration and unease flickered across his expression. He murmured softly to himself, reflecting on the changes since Hunter Sung Jinwoo had vanished. The appearance of new Hunter Gates had resumed, but thanks to Jinwoo's legacy, he had been able to establish the Hunter Association quickly, averting another catastrophe like the Great Cataclysm. Setting the tablet aside, Jin-chul leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly and deliberately. His thoughts turned to recent developments, a frown creasing his brow. Something about Stardust didn't fit with what he remembered from the previous timeline. His fingers tapped against the armrest as he contemplated the name, lingering uneasily in the air, and its distribution by Li Min of the Grim Reaper Guild. The puzzle pieces didn't align. With their guild master absent, was Li Min acting alone? Before he could ponder further, his phone vibrated sharply against the desk, shattering his concentration. His eyes narrowed as he read the incoming caller ID. Mr. Jinho. Curiosity piqued, he answered, his voice calm yet carrying a hint of interest. The voice on the other end trembled with urgency and desperation, the speaker's panic unmistakable. The man explained that he needed the Hunter Association's help concerning his nephew. Jin-chul's posture straightened instantly, alarm flashing in his eyes as the word sank in. He repeated cautiously, clarifying the identity of the nephew. The man confirmed, his voice thick with worry, that Sung Suho had awakened as a hunter, but was trapped inside a gate. A cold wave washed over Jin-chul as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. His face paled, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. The Shadow Monarch's heir, he realized, was in imminent danger. His mind raced, connecting the dots faster than words could form. Sung Suho was trapped, and time was running out. The episode ends here. That wraps up chapters 23 to 29 of the Solo Leveling Ragnarok series. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.